Deadpool 1 was a comic book movie that was a big departure from the superhero genre, and not surprisingly, it was a huge hit. And as you would expect, it has been given a sequel. But which one is superior? We're about to find out. Let the battle commence. The story for Deadpool is centered around a character called Wade Wilson, who one day finds out that he is diagnosed with cancer. Much to the dismay of him and his wife, he is approached by a mysterious man called Mr. Smith, who says that he can send him to a private facility and cure him of his cancer and make him a superhero. Wade takes the offer and finds that the facility is really used to weaponize those with fatal health conditions. As a result of the experiments, Wade Wilson gets his regenerative and athletic abilities, but at the expense of his entire appearance. He manages to escape, and from here, he adopts the superhero alias of Deadpool and vows to get revenge on Ajax, as well as getting him to restore his appearance. And the story for Deadpool 2 is that a character from the future called Cable travels back in time to kill a kid, but when Deadpool catches wind of this, he tries to protect him. And that's essentially the story behind this movie. There are plenty of events that take place, but the story really is that simple. Now, something you've probably already realized about Deadpool 2 is that the story is very much like Terminator 2. In fact, that is something the movie has been commonly criticized for. What I thought made it a little smarter though is that it actually reverses it. Instead of a Terminator going back in time to kill the future savior, this one goes back in time to kill the kid who becomes the future conqueror. So even though it could have been better, the story does essentially what I wanted it to and sets up a fun situation for Deadpool to participate in. That being said, I am not versed in the Deadpool comics at all, so I have no idea if there are better stories that they could have pulled from or not. Going back to the first Deadpool, I love the way it utilizes the opening credits. After seeing it again, it's still funny. I remember the first time I saw it. It was so unexpected and it perfectly hit every single comedic note it wanted to. Movies hardly ever have opening credits anymore, which is somewhat of a shame, as when they're done right, they perfectly set the tone of the movie. And they certainly set the tone flawlessly for Deadpool. The second movie has a great opening sequence too, as it rips on James Bond's opening credits, but the only problem is that it was not as funny and it needed to be longer. Also, I loved the inclusion of Colossus in both movies, but the only issue and question I have is when did he meet Deadpool? It is said that he knew Wade Wilson when he was Deadpool and not prior, but we go through his whole entire backstory, yet we don't get any mention of Colossus. So when did they meet exactly?
The assailant appears to be armed, dangerous, and wearing a red suit.
Deadpool. I've given Deadpool every chance to join us. You've been warned before, Deadpool. This is a shameful and reckless use of your powers.
Also, I wasn't keen on the way Wade met Vanessa. It's the only scene where I feel like the movie slows down too much to the point that I want to skip it. Without a doubt, my favourite parts of the movie is whenever we see Deadpool. His origin is fine, but when we are taken to the present where he's pursuing Francis, the movie's runtime goes by ridiculously fast. Now, with regards to how both movies paced themselves, Deadpool 2 had a scene where it slowed down a little, but it picked up very quickly, whereas the first movie always felt like it slowed down a bit much whenever it showed scenes from his past. And it's not because they're bad, on the contrary, they're actually very well done. It's because the stuff in the present was just so good and well paced that the stuff from the past felt slow in comparison. And much like the first movie, Deadpool 2 tries to switch between the past and present, but whereas it always worked in the first one, it just felt disjointed in the second. It wasn't bad, mind you, but it was inferior. That being said, the overall plot for Deadpool 2 is very thin, and it's just being coated with a lot of jokes to cover it up, and as a result, this is one of those situations where the story for the origin is much better than the sequel. So the movie with the superior story is the first Deadpool. Now, pretty much all of you know who Deadpool is at this point. He is a superhero that just so happens to be fully aware that he is a fictional character. As a result, he narrates the story to us, makes pop cultural references, and constantly breaks the fourth wall, and every time he does this, it's great. They also make you genuinely sympathize with him. When he escapes from the facility, the first thing he does is look for his wife, but just seconds before he was about to approach her, he gets a bunch of revolting reactions from people. And as someone who experienced a weeping face full of eczema in the past, I really felt for him in this scene. Going back to fourth wall jokes, I like all of them, but the only one that I thought was poorly executed is when he interrogates Mr. Smith here. This guy approaches people who are so sick to the point they are practically on their deathbeds, and in their vulnerable states, he approaches them and says that we can cure you and we can make you better than you ever were. which really translates to, we are going to give you an injection and then we're going to torture the shit out of you until you get your superpowers. Yeah, that's messed up, isn't it? So as you can imagine, we really want to see this guy get his comeuppance for taking advantage of these people in their depressed and fatal state. But surprisingly, Deadpool annoyingly pulls a PG-13 and moves the camera, and all we hear is this. What Deadpool should have said was, actually, this is an R-rated movie, so that means you are going to see everything. Or something along those lines, but he didn't, and I really didn't like that. Now I just want to point out that if you didn't like the character of Deadpool in the first movie, then you still won't like him in the sequel, as his sense of humor is elevated even more. In particular, I really lost it during the scene where he was talking to Fire Fist for the first time. It was just so hilarious. Somehow he manages to go from being serious, to adversarial, to patronizing, to sympathetic, all in the same scene, and it worked seamlessly. Speaking of which, the kid actor who plays Fire Fist was very good, but man was the character a little piece of shit. So, which movie did a better job with Deadpool? Well, both are great and incredibly consistent. However, I did find myself liking Deadpool better in the second film, as I found myself rooting for him a lot more, which is odd considering the story isn't as personal as it was in the first movie. I think it's the fact that we see more of his moral sensibilities in the second as he interacts with more people rather than just his co-workers, and it made me like him as a character a lot more. Either way, both movies got the character of Deadpool down to the T, and didn't make him an irritant, which would have been so easy to do. But still, I enjoyed him a little more in Deadpool 2. Probably the most underwhelming thing about the first Deadpool is the villain, Ajax, or Francis. Now he isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, I just didn't find him the least bit engaging. Also, the thing that really confused me is his whole operation of torturing people until they become mutants. It's just inefficient and a waste of time. He eventually says to Wade that if this final torture session doesn't trigger your mutant cells, then nothing will. So it kind of makes you think, instead of torturing people for so long, why doesn't he just put everyone in this oxygen remover? It'll save a crap ton of time, it will trigger their mutation quicker, and you will have an army of mutants in no time. Why waste time with the torturing chamber? At first I thought the movie was trying to say that he is so sick and twisted that he enjoys making people suffer, but he never came off as that type of bad guy. Heck, he never even sticks around during a torture session. He just leaves and then comes back after a while. So yeah. Now what gives him substance is that he has a history with our hero, and the movie shows us all of that in detail during the origin segments of the movie. If it wasn't for that, he would be an unbelievably lame villain, but as is, he's passable. And in Deadpool 2, we have Cable, played by Thanos himself, Josh Brolin. And he does a great job. He brought a different personality to the character, and when watching him, I didn't even once compare him to Thanos, which is very impressive seeing as we just came off of Avengers Infinity War. And was it just me, or did you expect Cable to rip someone's arm off? He's breaking arms left and right, but I kind of wanted him to take it all the way. But it turns out that he isn't as strong as I thought he was, because he couldn't. Or at the very least, wouldn't do it. Now, one of the reasons I am so glad that we have a villain like Cable is because anytime he tries to be serious, Deadpool keeps ruining the moment and turns everything into a joke, pretty much overruling him at every turn. And watching Cable react to that was so funny and made for a great dynamic between the two. Now, as far as the writing goes, Cable had a lot of potential, but the development the movie gave him is almost non-existent. And that really is a shame, as the foundation to make him a very sympathetic character was perfectly established. All it had to do was flesh him out and he would have been an amazing villain, or hero, however you want to look at it. But instead, he's just a bland slate. Josh Brolin is the one that elevated the character from being a nobody, but the script doesn't do him any favors and it does not give him much to work with. He had a ton of potential, but unfortunately the writers of this movie didn't take advantage of it. Speaking of which, Cable does something towards the very end of the movie that I thought was very sudden and out of character, and it felt very forced. And when you take into account the type of movie this is, with a little more thought, it could have been plausible, but in the end, it wasn't. Also, the inclusion of Juggernaut was a big surprise. No pun intended. He was huge, strong, and I like how even Cable was afraid of him and needed help to take him down. And I was very surprised to find out that Ryan Reynolds actually did Juggernaut's voice. I mean, I will have to watch his scenes again, but it never clicked to me even once that that was Ryan Reynolds the whole time. But yeah, Juggernaut was a great addition, and they did him right this time. It almost feels like a running theme for Deadpool, doesn't it? To incorporate characters that weren't done properly in previous X-Men films and make them more accurate to their comic book counterparts. So yeah, the villains aren't perfect, but the movie that did them much better is Deadpool 2. Anyone could play Francis, but very few people could have been able to play Cable this well. Josh Brolin brings his own charisma to the character and enriches it with a unique quality that wouldn't be there otherwise. So Cable is the far superior villain to Ajax.
What's my name? Who fucking cares?
The action in the first Deadpool is very simple, fun, and takes advantage of its R rating. But that being said, nothing about it made me super impressed or anything. It was definitely fun, and the brutality of the blood and violence was showcased very well in the opening action scene, but the rest seemed very tame in comparison. I still loved the action, but for an R-rated superhero movie, I did expect more. Especially after the opening action scene, which had me jaw-dropped. I mean, this is fantastic. But unfortunately, the violence doesn't get any better than this. But like I said, I still loved the action in the first movie, and in the end, I was still satisfied with what I got. Except for naked Ryan Reynolds, which I thought was too much. I mean, they showed stuff that I didn't need to see. Now in the second movie, the opening couple minutes looked like a John Wick movie where the sets were well lit, the action was super clear and well choreographed, and the blood and violence is illustrated so much better than the previous Deadpool, it's unbelievable. In the first Deadpool, the level of blood and gore was too tame to me. This shot took me by surprise, but the rest was shown too quickly, and it didn't focus on the injuries that much. Thankfully, the second movie fixed that, for the most part. But it does fall into the same shortcomings of the first movie, where there are points no blood would show even when it clearly should have. Sorry Deadpool, but Logan is the true winner with regards to incorporating his blood by a long shot. But that being said, this was a big improvement over the first Deadpool and is a definite step in the right direction. And seeing as it has almost double the budget of the first film, the action set pieces are way better and far more creative this time round. My favourite was this whole chase scene. It was fast paced, funny, and gave us a big surprise towards the end when Juggernaut was revealed. My only issue was that the CGI looked really bad at some points. I mean, the part where Domino was dodging all those crashing cars looked absolutely terrible. Funnily enough, the effects in the first movie are also starting to show their age now. When I watched it again to prepare for this video, I was surprised at how much I could easily make out the green screen shots, and I wasn't even trying. So overall, the action in both movies is great, and that is even more impressive when you take into account that the first Deadpool had a lower budget and somehow still managed to do a great job with the resources it had. But at the same time, Deadpool 2 does exactly what a sequel should do and makes the action bigger and better in every way possible while still maintaining a sense of plausibility within its established comic book world. So the movie with the superior action is Deadpool 2. Now doing jokes for a character like this is a very slippery slope, because it can either be really funny or really irritating. But thankfully, the comedy in the first Deadpool was great. I was laughing at pretty much every single joke, and anytime Deadpool broke the fourth wall, it surprisingly worked and didn't feel the least bit jarring. Now granted, not all the jokes hit. There were some that just went too over the top or didn't land the way the movie clearly wanted them to, and this is more of a nitpick, but I remember this one from the first movie in particular where it tried to be funny or satirizing in a place where it didn't need to be.
Let's dance. And by dance, I mean let's try to kill each other!
Like I said, it's more of a nitpick, but it's still something I notice whenever I watch this scene. Now I was really concerned for the jokes in Deadpool 2, because much like the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie, I was expecting the jokes to be way overblown to the point that it just ruins everything. But thankfully, it didn't. They were very smartly written and had the perfect execution. The X-Force's first mission in particular was so hilarious. It very cleverly makes fun of parachutes, and to my knowledge, I don't think any other movie or TV show has done this before to this extent. And I was laughing so hard during this scene. Not to mention that Deadpool 2 has the best mid-credit scene ever, and I challenge any other superhero movie to top it. And in general, something I noticed about Deadpool 2 is that there is a lot more stuff you want to talk about as soon as you've seen it. I want to discuss all the jokes, I want to talk about the action scenes and all the subtle and not so subtle jabs the movie makes to other comic book properties. Despite really enjoying all the jokes in the first movie, I didn't feel like I had as much I wanted to talk about once I had seen it. But that doesn't take away from how enjoyable they are. The first Deadpool movie is still one of the most funniest comic book movies I have ever seen. Oh, it would also be a crime if I didn't mention this. Let's very quickly talk about Dopender. In both movies, his interactions with Deadpool can go from completely normal to horribly cynical, and every time, it always gets a well-deserved laugh. I especially like what he says to Deadpool in the opening of the second movie. Both films also have TJ Miller, and honestly, he is good in certain scenes, but they really needed to give him a freaking script because his improv just flat out sucks, and it didn't emit any positive reaction from me. More than anything, he is only really there for Wade to interact with, but on his own, he really is nothing. Now in the second movie he did a better job, especially in an interrogation scene he had with Cable, but still, his part in both of these movies is without a doubt the most forgettable. Thankfully, the second movie gave us Domino with her powers of luck, and she compensated for his mediocrity. So it was pretty obvious, but the movie with superior jokes, in my opinion, is Deadpool 2. Now there seems to be a divide with this, but honestly, I thought the jokes in Deadpool 2 were much more thought out, smart, less juvenile, and they also had moments that would take you by surprise, which I don't recall getting in the first movie. Also, the jokes that Deadpool makes with Cable far exceed the jokes between him and Francis. I mean, beyond the one "say my name" joke, there wasn't any other funny back and forth dialogue between the two. Josh Brolin, on the other hand, is a much more talented comedic actor, and the interactions between him and Deadpool never got old. So yeah, in my opinion, the jokes in both movies are great, but they are so much funnier in Deadpool 2. In the end, I really enjoyed both of these movies. My biggest complaint with the first film is that it just felt too simple. It came off as a little bare bones. I'm not saying it was bad, it just lacked some weight to it. The second movie, on the other hand, was crammed full of material and elements that made it feel more elaborate and involved. It was not as simple as the first movie, and I really appreciated that. But it is way too simple with the story, and the first Deadpool kicks the second movie's butt in this regard. Oh, and I almost forgot, Megasonic Teenage Warhead and Yukio really didn't need to be in Deadpool 2, as they served no purpose and they just came off as dead weight. Also, Megasonic's shitty mood was a funny character trait in the first movie, but in the second movie, it just pissed me off. Instead of making the movie funnier, she was acting like that one person in that family get-together that doesn't want to be there and just ruins the occasion for everyone. That's how she came across in this movie, and when I reflect on the film, she increasingly aggravates and pisses me off. In the first movie, she felt involved, and she had a personality to go with her teenage mood. She just doesn't have a personality in here like she did in the first film. All she does is stand next to Yukio and say, "This is my girlfriend." I mean, what was the point of that? You know, she had a good run in the first movie, but now I just want to forget all about her. I really hope they don't show her again in any of the future movies. She put me off that much in this. But moody teenagers aside, both of these movies are awesome, and I had a ton of fun with both of them. It's time for the scores. When I saw the first movie, I gave it an 8 out of 10, but after watching the second movie, I actually enjoyed it so much that it actually makes the first seem like a lesser film. So Deadpool 1 goes down 1 point to a 7 out of 10, and Deadpool 2 gets a 9. I liked the first movie, but I really did love the second. In my opinion, for a movie of this caliber, it did pretty much everything better like a good sequel should. Additionally, if you are a John Wick fan like I am, then you will pick up on the director's stylistic choices that are prevalent throughout the entire film, both with the visuals and the wonderfully choreographed action sequences. A complaint people have with Deadpool 2 is that it's convoluted, and I honestly don't see that. I was able to stick with the movie from beginning to end, and I liked that it had a lot of stuff going on, and it all made sense within the context of the story. Well, with the exception of that one thing Cable did towards the end. I guess the only thing I would like to see in the next Deadpool or X-Force movie is for the film to satirize the action scenes a lot more. So far, both Deadpool 1 and 2 have jokes in their action scenes, but apart from the superhero landing, there isn't much with regards to pointing out the cliches in comic book action. So hopefully we'll get some more of that in the future sequels, but as far as this sequel goes, they took what worked in Deadpool 1 and made it even better. And I really can't wait to see what they do next with the character. So that's it for another Versus video, guys. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to share it as well, as the more popular my Versus videos get, the more episodes I'll be able to put out. And don't forget to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and the bell right next to it so you can stay up to date with my future Versus videos and other movie and TV show related content. Thank you very much for your continued support, guys. I always appreciate it, and I will catch all of you next time. Take care.